Good morning, guys. Good to see you all again. What we're going to do is we're going to weather the front end of this Sherman tank to look as if it's in the European theater of war. But before I get to that, I'm going to talk about a product that to me has brought out. It's these ration cartons that are glued together with white glue. You just nip them out with your X-Acto knife. The product number is 12689, but you sort of can't do it in an American tank in World War II without having all these little boxes. And they're very inexpensive at your local hobby shop. Like, there's a few local shops here, Panther Hobbies, Wheels and Wings, and they're on the shelves there. I'm sure at your local hobby shop they're on the shelf, and they retail for like $8 or $9 maximum, you know. So takes about 5 minutes to make one of the boxes. You just follow the instructions, which are laid out. You know, being a Tamiya product, the instructions are going to be perfect. So, but doing an American tank or even my Korean Sherman that you guys saw last.
Are those tied to any specific period, Davey?
Well, you can't go much past probably Korean War.
But World War II, Korea.
What about Vietnam? You wouldn't use them?
No, in fact, Tamiya make a Vietnam set.
Oh.
So, but it's one of those added little things on your tank. Now, once you build them, you still have to paint them.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to scare anybody by saying that. When I say paint them, you put 95% thinner in your airbrush, a little bit of buff or a little bit of Panzer yellow, and just give them a little zip across. So
Good depth, eh? Would British tanks have these ration boxes? Do you think?
you know, probably not, but there's a lot of communication between. Obviously, there's times in the Battle of the Bulge when the British Army was fighting alongside the Americans. I'm sure that if the British are low on their little tea biscuits, they trade them off to the Yanks and vice versa. You know, it's a little trade and barter thing.
Yeah.
You know, you give us Hershey bars and we'll give you some biscuits. So I'm sure that there's situations. I think the Canadians as well. You know, they hooked up with the Allies, the Americans. You know, later in the war. So I'm sure there's all kinds of trading. But anyway, I'm going to show this on the film here. This is thinned down about 95% thinner, 5% to me a buff, number 57. And you just want a very mild color. Because there's printing on the sides of these boxes, you don't want to wash that out with a swipe of your airbrush. So I just stand back and... Because what happens is obviously these tanks travel their farm fields and their roads, and it's just regular road wear that is going to splash up on the boxes and the sleeping bags and all the things that the crew is going to carry. So just tone them down a little bit from the packaged product.
That's more to tone down the lettering on the packaging, Davey?
Yeah.
Just to fade it so it's not quite as stark?
Yeah, like these would look as if they came right out of your regular grocery store, out of Costco, if you didn't touch them with the paint.
Would you apply, an oil wash to them, perhaps?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Because what happens with these boxes, if they're in good shape, and you'll see them on the front of a Sherman tank, but there's no food in those ration boxes on the front of the tank. They're full of unpoured cement. They're full of cement powder or... some protective, could be a box of stones for all we know. So when you see a Sherman with this sort of setting, where these little ration boxes are sitting there,
Yeah.
there's no food.
I didn't know that.
There's no
Wow.
hardtack in there.
Is that right?
No, that's all full of concrete, unpoured concrete.
Yeah. Wow.
So and it's because. When the crews want to stack them up, Patton wasn't a fan, but when they stack them up with sandbags, well, sandbags are only you got to find them locally. They're usually a wheat bag or a vegetable bag they fill it up with sand and drop it on the front of their tank for armor protection. So it's not like the GIs have a ration sandbags. you don't get them with your Sherman. It's the same with all the strapping on the back that I use.
Yeah.
All the strapping is from dead horses and farm fields and farm animals that have reins or like I say, horses and horse carts.
Yeah.
Well, if the horse goes up in smoke, unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do. But one of the things that obviously the crew would do is steal all the leather strapping, and that's what they would use to. These things aren't sort of the inventory when the Sherman comes off the boat.
Now, off topic, why would the Allies have all this stuff on stowage in their tanks, but you don't see German Tigers or Panthers with that amount? Why is that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Probably they had great reliability in the armor plating of their tanks. Panthers, sloped armor.
Yeah.
Well, but you do see a lot of like studs.
Studs
Studs have a lot of stowage on the back.
But not a lot
But
of
Stugs don't have a lot of sloped armor either.
Yeah.
I think part of it for maybe is not to block access to the
Yeah.
Vision ports.
or to obstruct the tank if it has to turn. Where the Stug, you're always going forward, right?
Yeah.
So you have a perfect platform in the back.
Because
Yeah.
I built Japanese armor. You don't see a lot of stowage on Chihas either. They're
No.
just-
Well, once again, back to the Marine thing, right?
Yeah.
They're fighting on an island.
Yeah.
Their home base is probably not too far away.
Yeah, bunker nearby.
Or one little short boat ride away. To get the supplies. Like the Marines, there's normally a few boats offshore, and a half a mile run in a little motorboat. You go and get brand new supplies off the ship.
It almost seems you can't build a Sherman without stowage. It just looks odd. It looks bare.
Yeah. No, it's very true. Now, do the U.S. Army Shermans have things on them? They don't either. Only in references. Like obviously, you're going to find that there's Shermans in the Pacific that are stacked with things. But let's pretend for a minute that there's 500 tanks out there.
Yeah.
I would suggest that maybe 400 of them don't have a thing on them.
Yeah.
So those are those kind of ratios.
Interesting.
And it's just based on the amount of photographs that I've looked at. If I've looked at 400 photographs, 300 of them don't have a thing on them. the Shermans, Army or Marine.
On a side note, continue with Sherman tanks. I was tapping Steve's Loga's brain at amps because I want to do a Sherman, and I'm not a Sherman expert, and I want to do a Pacific Sherman, and I think it's Beelzebub, one of the Marine. We have sandbags on the back of the tank with those wading trunks, but I see pictures with sandbags there. And pictures with the wading trunks, but not both. And he said, well, they wouldn't put the sandbags on the back while they're on a ship because it's heavy, wading through the water. They would take the trunks off and then put the sandbags on the beach. So you got to start thinking about the research and say, well, you can't do that. It's right. So it's and
at Iwo Jima they had all the wooden siding too.
Yes,
yes, because the Japanese magnetic mines or they throw them up and over the top and that sort of thing. So and they weren't easy to replace Sherman tanks in the Pacific because it's a long distance. Where were they stored? Well, San Francisco or Hawaii, so it's not like you go and get some more. So they cherished them. They had to look after them, and quite often one of the crew members would have been a mechanic by trade, during civilian times. I mean, that's just obvious, you just can't have a crew. They just can't throw the four of us together and say, hop in. One of us has to have the the sort of mechanics background. So, back to these just for a second, Herbie. Yeah, so obviously these carry all the rations, but once the boxes are empty, if they're in good shape, they load them up. So it's not uncommon to see the ration boxes on the fronts, but trust me, they're not full of food. They'll use anything to fill into these boxes. Pieces of steel, or a plate, or not a pie plate. I'm talking a metal plate. whatever they could use for, and you know, it's their lives, right? So, but anyway, guys, it's just it's a great product, very inexpensive, very effective, and this one has a little strap on it. That's just a piece of electrical tape that I've cut really thin and just wrapped it around. So this little box here has, and you can use flat solder or whatever you want as far as the little, you know, packaging, you know, and a strap to hold it down. So just a neat little product for American tanks and half tracks and Jeeps and whatever. Now, to me, I should expand on this a little bit, put maybe some medical boxes, that sort of thing. You know, that would be kind of a neat thing to do. And I'm sure that this is very inexpensive for Tamiya to produce.
Is that a new product, Davey, or?
To be honest, I wouldn't say it's new 2023, but certainly in the last 18 months, maybe 24 months, Tamiya's had this out.
Okay.
So I'll just reference the product number once more. It's number 12689, and it just says U.S. ration cartons, World War II. So anybody that wants to snag those, and as far as building one of them, I think it takes maybe 7 or 8 minutes to put one together. So because there's a little more to it, you know, these little packages, these boxes, when folded, slide into these boxes, you know. So there's a little bit of extra little neat, some little
And
assembly.
just plain old white glue will do.
White glue, you know, even watered down. So, but then, and just don't forget to give them a little shot of buff or something, just to take the Costco kind of cartony look, brand new, you know, fresh out of the box kind of look away from it. They wouldn't have been cleaned very long.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting.
So those are neat. And all right, so here's our little Sherman. We're gonna turn this shelf queen, which I've deckled and brought to olive drab. This tank is not going to be one that's going to sit on my shelf. We're going to use it for this sort of setting only. So please don't try to zero in on what's wrong with this Sherman, or you know, the wheels are missing or whatever. Don't worry about it. It's a shelf queen. It's just you know, something that we're going to use as a prop for our display and show the details. So what I'm going to do is try to turn the front end of this into that, you know, take this and turn it into that. So it'll take a couple episodes, I'm sure. And so the first thing out of I'm going to do is just give it a nice little buff, but I'm only going to go about halfway up, just above the little machine gun on the front. I'm going to spray a little bit of buff right over the decals, right over the, and this would have been, like I say, the kind of dust that would have turned up, you know, just normal travel off the roads and off the.
I want to hit the projector.
So if Robert hits the compressor, we're away.
So Dave, what you're simulating is dust kick up as opposed to modulating the color of the olive drab, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So this would have been if these two tanks were traveling,
Yeah.
you know, in convoy.
Yeah.
If you notice, smart, they're not that close together. The Sherman tanks are not in a line. They're not buckled like this unless they're parked and you know, the enemy is 5 miles away, maybe. But in general, they're for obvious reasons, they're far enough apart. But this tank is going to generate dust. It's that simple, and that dust is going to land on our tank.
Maybe you may want to come just over. Just right there.
Sorry, yeah.
What air pressure are you using? Would you know slightly?
Oh, probably 15. I like
wow.
spraying at 15.
Wow. Okay.
And that's with most everything that I do. I don't ever spray with much more than that, but I certainly, Harvey, I go way down. I can go down to 6.
Yeah, I was just about to say I'm usually 6 to 8.
Yeah, if I'm doing a German camouflage or something, I'm down to 8%.
Yes, right.
And very thin
Right.
paint, you know.
And you mentioned this buff is at what thinner ratio did you say?
Now this is about 95% thinner.
Wow.
This to me a lacquer thinner.
Yes, right. Okay.
5% color.
Okay, and is that because you want it to look like dust as opposed to a camouflage color?
Yeah, and I don't want to lose the decal, and I don't
Right.
want to lose my olive drab.
Right.
This is just a film,
Yes,
you know.
yes, yes.
This is like the film that would be on your car if you say drove, 15 miles.
Yes.
Out of the car wash. You drove 15 miles. That's the dust I'm trying to put back on it.
Yeah.
And there's no gloss in here. This is flat buff.
Now I know you're using this for a prop dig, but you'd also have to apply that on your tracks too, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'll take this down the back here,
Yeah.
especially on the sides
Yes.
by the American Star. Up around the back here, Harvey. Mm-hmm. I would nail it the same
Right.
color up in here.
And then once you're gonna, I talk to Dave a lot. Some guys do the model with the tracks on. This one is with the tracks off. That's your preference, but you'd have to apply that mist to the tracks, even if you
Right.
Just to get it
because you get the
consistent.
consistent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I don't know if it's just for comment, but I don't necessarily build my Shermans with these bogies on it either. I'll totally paint it without these on, so that I can get in behind here and put my mud on, and then I'll attach. But because this is a Shelf Queen,
Dave, you mentioned that you do everything on there, right? Is that a new process for you?
That depends. If it's easy to do it with the road wheels and the bogies off,
Okay.
I'll do that.
Okay.
But sometimes it's
leave it on the rest.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go too far back here because we're not going to paint really too far back. So this is just the foundation for what's to come. Now in the end, you may not recognize this buff that I just put on there in the end product. Like you can barely see it on this Sherman here. But you can't go from mud to olive drab. You have to have a gradual
Right.
film of mud and dirt and dust. And all you have to do, back to what we were talking about earlier, about the mud flaps on a dump truck in, say, January or here in Ontario. That's where we're aiming for. And we all know what that looks like. We've all taken a photograph of a bulldozer to apply to our tracks and what have you on our tanks. So that's what this is trying to accomplish. So this is that first layer. Now, so we have, I don't know if the camera picks it up too much, but I think you can definitely see
Yes.
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
of dusting.
Yeah.
So next is we're going to shift to our asphalt.
Can't wait for this.
All right, one of the things that you're going to need, and this gives it the body, because this is a very smooth, this is like margarine, this asphalt, and a lot of the products, AK, in these earth tone, earth effects products, take on the smoothness of margarine or butter or what have you. Well, in my case, that doesn't work. So what this is parsley. Just regular parsley that you'd use at cooking in your kitchen. And then I bake it at 425 for about 40 minutes. And what it does is it browns it all up, because this will be in your wife's kitchen. Nice bright green, it's an additive to cooking.
Right.
So what I do is I bake it, and it's very inexpensive. You can find a whole jar of parsley at Costco for $3. I mean, it's one of those
Which will last you like 1,000.
1,000 models. So it's very inexpensive, but you have to use the oven treatment on it. It's no good when it's green. It doesn't work. Why? Because basically bakes, and it becomes very crispy.
Is that's to add texture to the?
This is going to add the texture to our product.
Now, would you use that instead of, say, plaster of Paris, which is the older method?
The nice thing, doesn't get as fine as plaster of Paris.
Oh, okay.
You know, this I can make it as fine or not as fine as I want. So I pinch it in my fingers to make it smaller, but then I add a little bit more just regular parsley, and it's just, you know, it just looks like ground cover in 35th scale. I mean, it's excellent.
And can you imagine the benefits? Once you've used it, you could actually just throw it on the meal at the end of the night.
If need be, you know. So you in this case, when you're doing your groundwork, just use the parsley as your ground cover. You don't have to use a lot of asphalt. You can use your regular, painted brown or brownish. Add this on with a little bit of white glue, and it's a great ground cover for a lot of figure guys. Use this because they're using that little base for a one standing figure, and they're doing some sort of figurine of that time. It doesn't matter what period, but this is a fantastic ground cover, and it's dirt cheap. So anyway, I mix that up, crush it, and if you read this article that this is where I got this from. Lester Plaskett talked about it in the article that he did on his Sherman, and I just basically took a little bit of that, So we're all sharing, guys. We're all, that's why they put magazines out. That's why he wrote it in there, so that, 5 months later, I could come on here and talk about it. So, it's a great, inexpensive way to get the ground cover. So then,
on a side note, when I was working on my T-Lav, Canadian T-Lav,
right,
I was trying to get the proper traction texture on the top of the turret, on the top of the hull, and I found that chinchilla sand sifted mixed with paint, and you apply it, is perfect.
Yeah.
It gives you that little sand texture that the crew would have on the surface of the vehicle
the anti-skid.
Anti-skid.
Yep.
Yeah, so feel free to.
Yeah, and it's an inexpensive way of doing it.
Now I have enough chinchilla sand to do 1,000 T.
Yeah, you can do the whole.
Yeah.
So this, like I say, it's sort of like margarine. This texture,
Interesting.
and it's jet black, and it dries. If you use it as asphalt, it will dry just like the tarmac on a.
Dave, you like that too. I still, I'm old. Maybe I'm old school. I mix the powders with plaster of Paris, but we're all different, right? I seldom have. Now that I'm looking at what Dave's doing,
I think it's convenience.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Hey,
Well,
maybe
look
I can try
at it. It's just like jet black.
Yeah.
So anyway, you dig into the pot a little bit, and I'm putting it right on top of my parsley. But it's going to still be jet black. There's still color to be added here.
But that's really the base for like your deepest, darkest mud.
Oh yeah, this is bog. This is like bog stuff. So then I take our pigments. So let me just show you how. Like this is jet black. Fresh poured asphalt. It's a great product if you're doing a road, contemporary stuff in the Ukraine setting or any setting. It's perfect. Car modelers use this asphalt for their bases they use for their cars, 24 scale cars. So I'm going to use just a dry mud color, but you can use almost any brown pigment that you want. Just any medium brown. Pigment.
And which one is that?
This one is 502 is dry mud.
Dry mud.
And I'm just gonna mix that in there with the asphalt. So it's just the camera can pick that up.
You can see how the hobby's progressed. Remember the 1970s, those old scale military modeling books where they would apply dirty thinner as
Yeah, exactly.
Now you're using all these powders and all these newfangled techniques. It's really evolved.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, Shep Payne didn't have this luxury.
No. But his stuff still stands.
His stuff still stands. So now we have our porridge ready to apply to the tank. And if the camera can pick that up, it's kind of bog.
Bog with a little bit of dirtiness now.
The other thing, Harvey, that's nice to add in, especially if you're doing, once I get to the running gear on the tank, is you take a little bit of hemp. You know, just hemp rope for twine for wrapping a present, or not a present, but a package. Just cut that into the appropriate length. It also will look like, you know, the grasses, you know.
I also like the I think Vallejo makes it, the crushed grass. That stuff's nice too.
Oh, the seed ball.
The seed, yeah.
Oh yeah, that'll work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not jet black anymore. I don't know if the camera will pick up on it.
It is but it's a very dark brown.
Yeah.
Yep. And I can just continue to add
Right.
pigment until I'm satisfied. So I'll just add
the more pigment, the lighter. Yeah.
Yep. As long as, and here's your reference. Here's what I don't want. I don't want that Hershey chocolate color.
Yeah.
You know, Hershey's chocolate sort of brown. I'm not aiming for that whatsoever. I could buy that off a shelf. AK make that product.
I don't think Hershey's Chocolate Bar Company would like what you're saying now, but yes. Oh, we're talking
No, it's
modeling.
the best.
Yes.
It's the best chocolate.
There you go.
It just doesn't make. It's just not a great modeling product.
Hershey's coming after
The
us.
CEO of Hershey's is going to
It's
sue
coming
us.
after us.
So, where's my little? If you want to pass me my little ground cover. There we go. So here's our little ground cover that I made up a couple of days ago. I ran a Sherman track through it, and this is just sort of a little base for you know, show and tell stuff. You know, to get my point across a little better.
And that dries hard. Yes.
Hard as a rock.
Really.
All right, so now we're gonna, and there, once we put the mud on the tank, and you can, like I said, you thicken it up by using more parsley, make it browner by adding more pigment, but I think I'm where I'm at. This is that bog kind of color. So this is not a color, I don't think, that you're gonna use in July. If your setting for your tank is you know, Battle of Normandy, yes, is there fields of dirt like this? I mean, obviously in Normandy they're making wine, or you know, there's going to be this color on the ground in July. I'm not saying there isn't. It's just more. It's just better if you're doing a setting that's sort of moist, January, February type of setting. It just. Alrighty. Now, one of the things that also the Americans did was they always would take a fence beam or a piece of wood off of an old barn or a shed or a door, and you know, they always add a little piece to hold all the belongings. You know, and like John Rosengrant, one of the modelers who years ago did a nice Sherman jumbo, he used a piece of rail from a train track. You know, the Americans were great at that sort of stuff, whatever was around, you know. So Rosengrant used a piece of rail, I'm using a piece of wood out of a barn, but whatever was in the hood, you know, that's what you... So obviously this is just a support for their belongings, you know. It didn't come with the Sherman at the Ford plant.
And what did you make that? Did you make that? Is that just a piece of wood that you?
Yeah, it's just a piece of styrene, which I scribed a little bit.
To give it some wood texture.
Yeah, chipped it up a little bit.
Nice.
You know, a battle weathered kind of piece of wood, but it's actually a piece of evergreen stock. If you're going to use, and most Shermans in the European theater war had this cross piece, make sure that you put that on before your mud, because you're going to be chiseling out your nice project
Call it to get it.
if you forget.
Yeah.
Right.
So think a little bit ahead.
Right. Or storage for that matter, right? If it's on the lower ends of the vehicle. The
Yeah.
packs would
Exactly.
do a bit of that too.
Yeah. So, think it through the day before. Now this isn't going to, this takes a little bit to dry, this asphalt. So what I'm going to do is apply it onto the tank. And then I'm going to have to bring back a second episode to weather it and that sort of thing. So this might be a shorter episode than normal, but I'm just going to apply the mud. And then the sort of project ends until the asphalt dries, because the next step is to add the oil paints and what have you to the mud. So not necessarily over top, but just to harmonize it into the tank. So you'll see what I mean once I get all this mud on. It's gonna not look like that. This then we'll take steps in oil paints to sort of bring it all together. So this is our sort of late January sort of mud going on here. And I just use one of these great metal sticks from Tamiya. We all have them and never know what to use them for other than stirring, and then we lose it. But these chrome sticks are the best for all kinds of modeling. There's not an application better than that thing, the applicator. It's a great little tool. And I just apply it as if I'm applying margarine to my tank here. I just have my little stick.
So you can be messy now, yes?
I can be messy. And the nice thing is this is acrylic, so if I don't like it, I can take it off. Mm-hmm. It's going to leave a brown or a dark stain on the tank, but that's okay too.
But if you were to take it off, you'd have to do it relatively soon.
Yeah, I'd have to do it within an hour.
There you go.
Or it'll set. Yeah,
It'll
it'll set a
set.
little quicker than that.
Yeah.
Just looking for my little paintbrush, but what have I done with my little paintbrush? Just wait 1 second, fellas.
Did you have it there?
Here we go. Looking all over for it, and it's 2 inches from me. There we go. So, not much is happening now. This doesn't look like mud. It doesn't look like anything. But it will shortly.
And then working that in, Davey?
Yeah, I'm just going to blend it across. And then when I get to the other side, closer to where this bogey would be, this wheel, it would build up again. Like I have it built up.
And that's just, again, plain water you're using, yes?
Yes, just plain water. So you can see how it's built up on the sides versus, in the center. For one, it's deckled, and you want that decal to show. Yeah. So I'm just going to fool around pushing it around. But these rollers are going to generate, and the tracks are going to generate a lot of mud and mess flying up on the tank. So you're just gonna finesse it right into the spots. And if you need more ground cover, just throw a little bit more in the mix.
A pinch of parsley.
Yeah. I've heard some models actually they actually use their garden and dirt. Some guys.
Yeah, as long as you paint it, garden dirt is fine. but it's not 1-to-1 scale.
Right. Right.
Garden dirt has to be painted.
Yeah, and you
believe it
have
or not,
right, or
it doesn't
you have
look
to
right.
crush it a bit more. Yeah, yeah. Would you think that there's any advantage or disadvantage of using, like, to me, a thinner to do what you're doing now, or would that be dangerous?
Oh, to me, a thinner works fine, except that what you don't want it to do is set off the olive drab.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, but it's
Unless you have a protective coating on it, and why would you do all that trouble and just use water?
Yeah, because the water is not going to leach into
Yeah.
olive drab color.
Plus, it's cheaper.
Yes.
There's that benefit. It's free. Well, free-ish.
Free-ish, yeah.
Now, the best effect with this is going to be once it's dry. Right now it's super glossy. It's 1-to-1 scale gloss, and I could go down on, we could talk all day about 1-to-1 scale gloss versus 35th scale gloss, but what you sort of want is your mud to be sort of eggshell or a little bit, in that you don't want it super shiny, except
scale wet.
right. You might have it super shiny down in here where it's close to the ground, close to the bog, close to the little stream that it just smashed into. But
Now, if you were to fix that vehicle to a base or not,
Yep.
are you one to also do the underside of the hull to all that work with this mud?
just to some extent,
Yeah.
don't go crazy.
Right, because nobody sees it.
Nobody sees it,
Yeah.
but you're gonna have to do something. So as you guys can see, I'm just sort of finesse, right? But you can see how that decal changes across the front here versus on the other side of our little platform here. There's a lot of difference. And on our next episode, because I'm just about finished here, we'll let this tank go away and dry. And our next episode, we'll turn it into the end result. And the next thing is, it being acrylic, when I apply the oil paints to it, it's not going to, it's not going to thin it down again, it's not going to reactivate it, it's not going to do anything because we're using oil paints.
Yep.
And the thinner is not going to,
Yep.
get in amongst our asphalt and disturb it in any way. So
Nice.
now the other thing, like you said, Harvey, you can take sand from the garden and mix it up. I've used sand in here too, and it just takes on this dark color. The only thing is you have to be careful. Mud, you never see the granular, in mud. It's just a characteristic. All right, so I'm just finishing off the bottom of the tank, and I don't go too far back. I go a couple of inches into the back of the tank, and then what I can do is just airbrush dark brown or almost black underneath just to give it an effect. But I'm going to glue it to the base, and the base is going to be contoured with earth and what have you, so it's not really going to be an issue.
So nobody's going to see underneath.
No one's going to see it. It's an hour I'm never going to get back. So no one's going to see it. But what we'll do now is I'm going to let this dry thoroughly, and then we're going to start to add the muddy oil paints to it, and maybe a little bit of pigment. And so I will see you guys shortly for our next episode. And thanks so much for watching, and I appreciate coming back and
it was great.
doing a little video work. So
Like old times at Horner Hobbies, Davey.
yeah. So thanks so much, Dave, for having me.
Oh, it was great. Thank you for coming.
All right.